What was it like to grow old in the Middle Ages? Those long centuries between 500 and 1500. Did people even make it to old age? And if they did, what awaited them? Number 5. Persistent respiratory afflictions and consumption. Life in the Middle Ages was a constant battle against the elements, and the very air people breathed often carried unseen dangers, especially for the elderly. Many older individuals found themselves trapped in a slow, agonizing decline brought on by persistent respiratory afflictions. One of the most dreaded of these was consumption, a term then used for what we now understand as tuberculosis. But it was not just consumption. Chronic bronchitis, relentless pneumonia, and other severe lung infections became an inescapable part of life for many in their later years. Imagine a person whose days were punctuated by a constant hacking cough, a sound that rattled their bones and seemed to tear at their very being. Breathlessness became a permanent companion, making even the simplest movements a monumental effort. Walking across a small room, rising from a stool, or even just speaking a few sentences could leave them gasping for air, their chest heaving. The air in their homes, often smoky from open hearths, filled with the dust of daily life, and perhaps the lingering stench of unwashed bodies and animal waste, offered no respite. Every inhaled breath was a potential irritant, a tiny attacker further inflaming already compromised lungs. The body itself seemed to betray them. Consumption led to a terrifying wasting away, a slow erosion of flesh and muscle that left the bones starkly outlined beneath thinning skin. Strength ebbed away like a tide receding from the shore, leaving behind a frail skeletal form. Fevers became a common occurrence, burning through the body with an intense heat, often accompanied by drenching night sweats that soaked through rough linen and straw mattresses, leaving the afflicted cold and clammy in the pre-dawn chill. The cycle of fever and chills, coughing and breathlessness, exhaustion and pain became a cruel, unrelenting rhythm of their remaining days. This physical decline had profound effects on daily life. A person once capable of working in the fields, weaving cloth, or tending to household chores would find their hands trembling, their legs too weak to carry them, their lungs too ravaged to sustain the effort. Basic self-care, like dressing or eating, required immense fortitude, often becoming tasks that could only be managed with the help of others. Disreliance on family members or community support could be a source of shame or deep frustration for an individual who had once been independent and productive. Their inability to contribute meant a loss of status, a shift from respected elder to a dependent burden. Socially, these chronic lung conditions were often isolating. While the concept of contagion was not fully understood as it is today, people observed that illnesses seemed to spread. A persistent cough, especially one that brought up blood or phlegm, could understandably provoke fear and avoidance. Family members might keep their distance, children might be warned away, and visitors might be hesitant to enter the sick room. This created a profound loneliness for those whose lives were already narrowing, cutting them off from the companionship that might have eased their suffering. Medieval understanding of these ailments was steeped in the humoral theory which proposed that the body was governed by 4 primary fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness was seen as an imbalance of these humors. Consumption might be attributed to an excess of cold or damp humors, or a general putrefaction of the body's internal workings. Sometimes, illnesses were believed to be caused by bad air known as miasma, rising from swamps, decaying matter, or overcrowded settlements. Divine displeasure or even witchcraft could also be invoked as explanations for such a devastating and prolonged sickness. The treatments offered were often rudimentary and based on these limited understandings. Herbal remedies were common, with practitioners prescribing concoctions made from plants like licorice, known for its soothing properties. Horehound, which was believed to aid coughing, or lungwort, whose leaves were thought to resemble and thus treat the lungs. These were brewed into teas, mixed into poultices, or pounded into powders. Special diets, often focusing on easily digestible foods like thin gruel or broth, were recommended. Bloodletting, a widely practiced therapy, involved opening a vein to drain blood, aiming to rebalance the humors or remove corrupt blood, though it often further weakened an already frail patient. Cupping, which involved applying heated cups to the skin to create suction, was another common practice, believed to draw out bad humors. For some relief was sought through prayer, pilgrimages, or the intercession of saints. Evidence of these conditions comes from various sources. Skeletal remains from medieval cemeteries across Europe have provided undeniable proof of the prevalence of diseases like tuberculosis. Telltale lesions on bones, especially in the spine and ribs, reveal the insidious march of the infection through the body. Historical texts, including medical treatises, chronicles, and even personal letters, contain countless references to individuals suffering from consumption or similar wasting sicknesses, detailing their symptoms and the devastating impact on their lives. These accounts often spoke of the slow, inevitable decline, of hopes dashed, and of families watching their loved ones fade away without hope of recovery. For the aged in the Middle Ages, persistent respiratory afflictions were not merely a discomfort, but a relentless, debilitating torment that stole their breath, their strength, and often their final years. Number 4. Untreated cataracts and vision loss. In a world before electric light, before printing presses made books widely accessible, and before any form of modern spectacle correction, vision was an absolutely critical sense for navigating daily life. For the aged in the Middle Ages, the gradual dimming of sight, often culminating in profound vision loss or complete blindness due to untreated cataracts, represented a devastating blow. This condition, a natural part of the aging process for many, turned a once familiar world into a blurry, dangerous maze. The onset was insidious. Perhaps a once vibrant landscape began to appear as if seen through a perpetual haze. Colors might fade, becoming muted and dull. Fine details, once sharp and clear, would blur into indistinct shapes. This clouding of the eye's natural lens, the very definition of a cataract, progressed slowly but relentlessly. What began as a slight inconvenience could evolve into a pervasive difficulty and eventually, for many, a complete inability to discern light from shadow. Imagine trying to perform even the simplest tasks when the world around you is nothing more than a murky blur or an impenetrable darkness. The impact on daily life was immediate and profound. For those who relied on their sight for their livelihood, such as a weaver, a scribe, a tailor, or a meticulous artisan, failing vision meant the loss of their craft and their income. Even for those in less specialized roles, the challenges were immense. Reading even large script became impossible. Sewing a ripped garment, mending a fishing net, or preparing food with any precision became an insurmountable obstacle. The simple act of distinguishing edible food from spoiled could be perilous. Beyond livelihood, personal independence was severely curtailed. Navigating familiar environments, even within one's own small cottage, became fraught with peril. A misplaced stool, an uneven floorboard, or a low doorway could lead to painful falls and injuries. The risk of tripping over livestock, stumbling into a ditch, or wandering into dangerous areas outside the village increased dramatically. Dependence on others for basic needs, such as being guided to the latrine or helped to find one's way to the communal well, was a humiliating reality for many who had once been strong and self-sufficient. Socially, the loss of vision could lead to deep isolation. Conversations often relied on visual cues, and participating in communal activities like market days or religious gatherings became challenging and disorienting. A person who could no longer recognize faces, red expressions, or contribute to group tasks might find themselves increasingly marginalized and withdrawn. Companionship could become limited to those willing to offer constant assistance, and loneliness often settled in a heavy cloak over an already difficult existence. Medieval understanding of cataracts was rudimentary. They were often described as pearls forming within the eye, or attributed to an imbalance of humors, with a particular emphasis on cold and damp humors collecting in the eye. Some believed it was a natural process of aging, or even a divine judgment. Accurate anatomical knowledge was limited, so the true nature of the condition remained a mystery. Treatments were few and far between, and often fraught with extreme danger. The most widely known cure for cataracts was a procedure called couching. This involved using a sharp needle, often made of bronze or steel, to push the clouded lens of the eye out of the line of vision, usually downwards, or to the side. The practitioner, often an itinerant barber, surgeon, or a local wise man, would perform this without anesthesia, relying on the patient's pain tolerance and the hope of a steady hand. While some individuals might experience a fleeting return of crude vision, the ability to perceive light and large shapes, the success rate was abysmally low. Infection, often leading to complete and irreversible blindness, was a common outcome. The procedure was excruciatingly painful, and there was no way to prevent the lens from migrating back into place or causing further damage. Other, less invasive, though equally ineffective remedies included various eye washes made from rosewater, fennel, or other herbs believed to cleanse or clarify the eye. Superstitious charms, prayers, and pilgrimages to healing shrines were also common last resorts, offering comfort more than cure. Evidence of widespread vision loss in the medieval population is largely inferential. While skeletal remains do not directly show cataracts, the clear evidence of arduous physical lives, nutritional deficiencies, and prevalent infections suggests that general health was often comset and progression of age-related conditions. The sheer absence of effective corrective lenses or surgical interventions meant that those afflicted with significant vision impairment had no recourse. Historical accounts in medical texts sometimes mention blindness, often as a consequence of accident or disease, highlighting the severe challenges faced by those without sight in a world designed for the sighted. The very structure of medieval society, which demanded physical participation in almost all aspects of life, meant that losing one's vision was a profound handicap, transforming a capable individual into a vulnerable one, dependent on the goodwill and patience of others for survival. For the aged, the dimming of their world meant a closing and a profound loss of independence and the ability to engage with the world they had known. Number 3. Severe dental decay and oral infections. The human mouth in the Middle Ages was often a battlefield, especially for the elderly. Far from modern understanding of oral hygiene and dental care, medieval mouths were breeding grounds for severe dental decay, gum disease, and agonizing oral infections. For an aged person, this often meant constant grinding pain, the slow but inevitable loss of teeth, and the debilitating consequences that rippled throughout their entire body. The journey to toothlessness began early for many. The medieval diet, heavily reliant on coarse grains like barley and rye, often contained abrasive particles from the millstones used to grind flour. These rough grains, along with the general lack of dental hygiene, chipped away at enamel, creating perfect entry points for decay. While sugar, as we know it, was a rare luxury, natural sugars in honey fruits and fermented drinks, combined with starches, still fed the bacteria that caused cavities. A single cavity, if left untreated, would grow into a gaping hole, exposing the sensitive pulp and nerve, causing excruciating pain. This pain could be constant, throbbing through the jaw, making sleep impossible, and turning every mouthful of food into a torment. Beyond mere cavities, gum disease was rampant. Food debris caught between teeth and gums along with hardened plaque led to chronic inflammation and infection of the gum tissue. Gums would bleed, swell, and recede, exposing the roots of the teeth and loosening their hold in the jawbone. Abscesses, pockets of pus formed by bacterial infection, were common. These could manifest as swollen, painful lumps on the gums inside the cheek or even externally on the jaw or neck. The pus would sometimes drain into the mouth, leaving a foul taste and breath. The consequences of such widespread oral disease were devastating. Chewing became an ordeal. A person missing several teeth or with multiple painful abscesses would find it nearly impossible to masticate solid food. This led to a diet of soft, easily swallowed gruels and porridges, often exacerbating existing nutritional deficiencies. Malnutrition and weight loss became common side effects, further weakening an already frail body. The chronic pain itself was debilitating, affecting mood, sleep, and overall quality of life. The constant discomfort could erode one's spirit, leaving them exhausted and irritable. Perhaps most dangerously, oral infections could spread beyond the mouth. An untreated abscess could lead to cellulitis, a serious bacterial infection of the skin and tissues, causing widespread swelling and redness. In severe cases, bacteria could enter the bloodstream, leading to systemic infections, sepsis, that were almost universally fatal in an age without antibiotics. Infections could also spread to the jawbone, osteomyelitis, causing necrosis and bone destruction, or even travel upwards to the brain, leading to meningitis or brain abscesses, which were agonizing and invariably fatal. The foul breath emanating from a mouth full of decay and infection was also socially isolating, causing others to recoil and reinforcing the afflicted person's sense of shame and discomfort. Medieval understanding of dental issues was far from scientific. Toothworms were widely believed to be the cause of cavities, tiny creatures gnawing away at the teeth. Other theories included an imbalance of humors, particularly cold or damp humors settling in the jaw, or the influence of malevolent spirits. Little was known about oral hygiene, beyond perhaps rinsing the mouth with water or certain herbal infusions. Treatments were brutal and largely ineffective, often causing more harm than good. The most common cure for a relentlessly painful tooth was extraction. This was performed without anesthesia, often by a blacksmith, a barber surgeon, or an itinerant tooth puller, using primitive tools like crude pliers or forceps. The procedure was excruciatingly painful, traumatic, and highly unstyle, often leading to severe infection of the empty socket or a fractured jaw. If the root broke off, the pain might persist, or a dangerous infection could brew beneath the gum line. For less severe pain, herbal poultices made from cloves, myrrh, or other pain-relieving herbs were applied to the affected tooth or gum. Cauterization, burning the tooth or gum with a hot iron, was sometimes attempted to kill the worm or stop the pain, but this was exceptionally painful and destructive. Religious charms, prayers, and visits to healing saints were also sought, offering spiritual solace where physical relief was scarce. Archaeological evidence from medieval cemeteries provides a stark and undeniable record of the prevalence and severity of dental disease. Skeletons unearthed from sites across Europe, from common burial grounds to monastic ossuaries, consistently show extensive dental pathology. Rampant cavities, significant tooth loss, signs of abscesses, and bone destruction indicative of severe gum disease. The absence of teeth in older individuals' jaws was a common finding, demonstrating that most people in the Middle Ages faced their later years with considerable difficulty in eating, often reduced to a diet of soft, easily digestible foods. Medieval surgical instruments found in archaeological digs also include specialized tools for tooth extraction, testifying to the frequent need for such procedures. For the aged in the Middle Ages, the mouth was a gateway to relentless pain, malnutrition, and potentially deadly infection, making every meal a challenge and every day a struggle against torment. Number 2. Chronic malnutrition and frailty. To be old in the Middle Ages often meant battling a constant gnawing hunger, and the profound weakness that came with chronic malnutrition. For many, especially those who were poor, widowed, or without supportive family, a long life was accompanied by a relentless struggle to simply consume enough food to survive, let alone thrive. This led to a state of extreme frailty, a debilitating condition that left them vulnerable to every passing ailment and robbed them of their final years of strength and independence. Imagine a body perpetually starved, its reserves depleted, its muscles wasting away to sinew and bone. Skin might appear pale and translucent, stretched taut over prominent joints and ribs. Hair could be thin, dull, and brittle. Even the mind could suffer with a persistent dullness, an inability to concentrate, or a general cognitive sluggishness that made daily tasks even harder. Swollen ankles or joints, often mistaken for other diseases, could be a sign of severe protein deficiency or other nutritional imbalances. The causes of chronic malnutrition were deeply interwoven with medieval society. Recurring famines, brought on by bad harvests, prolonged droughts or devastating floods, swept through regions, wiping out food supplies and leaving widespread starvation in their wake. Even in times of relative plenty, the diet of the common person was often monotonous and nutritionally inadequate. Staples like grain porridges, black bread, and watery vegetable pottages formed the bulk of meals. Access to protein-rich foods like meat, fish, or dairy, or to nutrient-dense fresh fruits and vegetables was often limited by social status, wealth, and geographical location. The poor, who formed the vast majority of the population, subsisted on a diet that, while filling, often lacked the vital vitamins, minerals, and proteins needed to sustain a healthy body, especially one undergoing the stresses of old age. For an older person, the impact of this chronic dietary deficiency was devastating. A severe lack of energy was a constant companion, making even the simplest daily tasks feel like monumental efforts. Rising from bed, walking to the well, or tending to a small garden plot could be exhausting. Muscle wasting left them weak and prone to falls, further increasing their vulnerability to injury. Their immune system, starved of essential nutrients, became severely compromised, making them highly susceptible to every passing infection. A simple cold could quickly escalate into pneumonia, a minor cut into a festering wound, and chronic infections became impossible to shake off. Wounds healed slowly, if at all, as the body lacked the building blocks for tissue repair. This state of frailty meant a profound loss of independence. An older person, once able to contribute to the household or community, found themselves increasingly unable to work, to fetch water, to gather firewood, or to even care for themselves. This often turned them into a burden on their families or the community, leading to a loss of status and, for some, eventual neglect. The constant hunger pangs, the weakness, and the cold that seemed to penetrate to their very bones made every day a battle for survival. Medieval understanding often attributed such wasting sicknesses or general weakness to an imbalance of humors or a general decline of the body's natural heat. Sometimes, it was seen as a punishment for sins, or simply an inevitable part of aging, without understanding the direct link to insufficient or inadequate food. Medical texts might recommend certain strengthening foods or tonics, but these were often beyond the reach of the impoverished or based on flawed humoral theories that offered little true benefit. For many, there was simply no solution beyond hope for a better harvest or the charity of others. Evidence of chronic malnutrition and frailty comes from various sources. Famine records from the period provide stark accounts of widespread starvation and its devastating effects on populations with the elderly and the young often being the first to succumb. Skeletal remains from medieval burial sites offer direct physical evidence. Studies of bones often reveal signs of arrested growth lines, known as Harris lines, which indicate periods of severe nutritional stress in childhood, affecting the individual's long-term health. Porosity in bones, indicative of osteoporosis, was also common, exacerbated by diets low in calcium and vitamin D, leaving bones brittle and prone to fractures. The general low stature of medieval populations, compared to later periods, also suggests chronic nutritional deficiencies from an early age. Moreover, the historical record is replete with instances of charity and almsgiving specifically aimed at supporting the infirm poor and the aged, highlighting the societal recognition of this widespread vulnerability. For the aged in the Middle Ages, chronic malnutrition and the resulting frailty were not just an inconvenience, but a profound, debilitating condition that stripped them of their strength, their health, and often their very lives. Number 1. Crippling arthritis and joint degeneration. 4. The aged in the Middle Ages. Few conditions were as ubiquitous, as persistently painful, or as utterly debilitating as crippling arthritis and widespread joint degeneration. It was a silent epidemic, etching its mark on almost every older body, turning once flexible limbs into stiff, agonizing instruments of torture. This was not a rare affliction. It was an expected companion of old age, a testament to a lifetime of hard labor and harsh living. Imagine waking each morning to a body that felt alien, stiffened by the night's cold and the relentless march of disease. Every movement from rising out of bed to walking across a room was accompanied by a grinding, searing pain. The knees, hips, spine, and hands were particularly vulnerable, bearing the brunt of daily toil. These joints meant to glide smoothly would instead grate and click, their cartilage worn away, bone rubbing against bone. Swelling was common, turning fingers into gnarled bulbous knots and knees into painful balloon-like protrusions. The once straight spine would begin to curve, stooping the posture, reducing height and making every step an effort of balance and endurance. The impact of such pervasive joint disease on daily life was catastrophic. Simple acts that we take for granted, bending to pick something up, kneeling for prayer, dressing oneself, or even lifting a cup of water, became profound challenges. Manual labor, the bedrock of medieval existence, became impossible. A farmer could no longer grasp a hoe, a weaver could no longer manipulate threads, and the homemaker could no longer churn butter or knead dough. The ability to perform any task requiring fine motor skills or significant physical exertion was slowly, painfully eroded. Walking, for many, became a shuffle, each step a testament to sheer willpower against an onslaught of pain. Some would become completely immobile, confined to their beds or a small corner of their home, unable to move without assistance. This profound physical limitation led to complete dependence on family members or the community, for everything from meals to personal hygiene. The loss of autonomy was deeply demoralizing, transforming a once active contributing member of society into a reliant observer of life. Social isolation often followed, as their inability to move freely prevented participation in communal activities, religious ceremonies, or even simple visits with neighbors. The prevalence of arthritis and joint degeneration in the Middle Ages is overwhelmingly evident from archaeological records. Nearly every adult skeleton unearthed from medieval cemeteries across Europe shows signs of significant degenerative joint disease, particularly in individuals who lived past middle age. The telltale signs are clear: osteophytes, bone spurs, forming around joint margins, eburnation, polishing of bone surfaces where cartilage has worn away, and changes in the shape and density of vertebral bodies. These skeletal markers paint a vivid picture of a population constantly grappling with chronic pain and physical limitations. The relentless manual labor, farming, building, hauling, grinding, combined with poor nutrition, damp living conditions, and the absence of effective pain management or preventative care, created a perfect storm for the widespread development of severe arthritis. Joint pain was often attributed to gout or rheumatism, terms that encompassed a wide range of joint afflictions. The humoral theory again played a central role, with conditions believed to be caused by an excess of cold or damp humors settling in the joints, or an imbalance of phlegm. Some thought it was a natural consequence of aging or a cold that had entered the body and settled in the bones. Treatments were largely palliative and lacked any true understanding of the underlying pathology. Herbal remedies were popular, with practitioners applying poultices made from herbs like comfrey, known for its soothing properties, or willow bark, which contains salicin, a precursor to aspirin. Hot baths, often infused with herbs, were used to alleviate stiffness and pain. Massage was sometimes employed to soothe aching muscles. Cupping and bloodletting were also tried, in an attempt to draw out bad humors or excess fluids. Charms, superstitious rituals, and fervent prayers to saints, like Saint Erasmus or Saint Lawrence, were also common avenues for relief, offering spiritual comfort where physical remedies failed. For many, the only enduring treatment was the grim acceptance of their fate, enduring the pain day after day until death finally brought release. The overwhelming archaeological evidence, combined with mentions in medieval medical texts that describe symptoms and offer remedies for joint pain, leaves no doubt. For the aged in the Middle Ages, crippling arthritis and joint degeneration were not merely an inconvenience, but a profound, inescapable, and agonizing reality that stripped them of their mobility, their independence, and often their dignity, making every day a testament to their endurance.